This is Part 2, Episode 126. The funnel's volume and rotation speed were also increasingly continuously along with its soul power. Its gravitational force became stronger as it became larger, and even the stones and sand around it were being pulled in its direction. However, it was immediately ground to dust by the powerful soul power. The space around the tiny funnel slowly began to contort even more. Its volume was still increasing as it spun, but its rotation seemed a little irregular, while the funnel itself was no longer stable. It was trembling faintly. "I'm losing control." An ominous feeling surfaced in Hui Yuhao's heart as he pounced behind a small hill on the side. Boom, 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 intense explosions could be heard as a vigorous air flow rushed over his head. The sound waves were deafening as intense soul power undulations erupted in all directions. However, everything settled down very quickly. Hui Yuhao looked up at where the funnel was before, and he could see an enormous crater that was 30 meters in diameter and more than 10 meters deep. A hurricane seemed to have swept over the large crater, and he could see many marks like blade cuts around it. Hui Yuhao, even with his full strength, couldn't do any better. However, he didn't even use 10% of his soul power. High-speed rotation and compression were undoubtedly the reasons why the tiny funnel had become so strong. However, the funnel became very unstable when he lost control of it. There were clear spatial undulations and contortions around the funnel. However, there was a clear gap between that and the beast god's black holes. That was probably because he didn't have enough soul power. It was no wonder the beast god was so formidable. He had stored so much soul power in that state in his body. It would be a surprise if he wasn't that frighteningly powerful. Hui Yuhao understood that controlling such power was far too difficult with his current strength. However, understanding and experiencing the principles concerning this was very beneficial for his future cultivation, so that he didn't take any long roads. He decided to stop experimenting, because he wasn't sure whether he could distance himself from the pull of the funnel using instant teleportation, if the funnel became stronger than before. What would happen if he couldn't? That meant he could only detonate it prematurely. Otherwise, the ultimate result would be that his soul power would be sucked dry, or perhaps the funnel would swallow everything. The funnel would increase to an even more frightening state before a tremendous explosion would be triggered. Hui Yuhao had already observed and learned a lot today. As for his next experiment, he felt that it would be a lot safer if he attempted it after he had returned to the academy. Hui Yuhao rushed back to the army camp. The explosion from before was quite loud, but the army camp was ultimately relatively far away, while he had also chosen a valley in the mountains. That was the reason why nothing much happened in the army camp. He silently snuck back to his own tent, but was startled when he lifted his curtain, because there was actually someone else in his tent. Tang Wutong was frowning as she stood in the center of the tent and asked as he walked in, "Where did you go?" Hui Yuhao hesitated momentarily as he stammered, "I went to the toilet." Tang Wutong retorted angrily, "Do you need to spend 1 hour on the toilet?" "I have constipation," Hui Yuhao answered feebly. "You?" Tang Wutong grunted furiously as she turned to leave. "Hey, how did you know I wasn't in my tent?" Hui Yuhao asked subconsciously. Tang Wutong had already stomped to the entrance of his tent. She paused and replied, "I was afraid that something would happen to you, so I decided to visit you tonight, and discovered that you weren't here anymore." "Where did you go?" Hui Yuhao could tell that her voice was softening, and Dorma's beautiful face surfaced in his mind once more. His heart softened as he spoke the truth. "I went to experiment with a method of controlling soul power. It wasn't very convenient to do it inside the army camp, so I decided to go outside." Tang Wutong turned around and stared at him in shock. "Your body is already like that. Why are you still doing experiments? What if something happened? Couldn't you have just waited for 2 more days?" "Oh, all right, I made a mistake." Hui Yuhao admitted his mistake conscientiously. Tang Wutong grunted and said, "Sleep early. Good night," and she walked away after that. Hui Yuhao was in a little bit of a daze as he watched her departing profile. "Her attitude towards me seems a little better than before. Unfortunately, she's not Donga. How fantastic would everything have been if she were Donga?" Hui Yuhao lamented in his mind as he sat back on his bed and quietly recalled every detail of his experiment. 2 days quickly passed as Hui Yuhao's body gradually recovered. Positive news came back from the front lines. The Sun Moon Empire's internal territories were indeed empty, while the White Tiger Duke's war strategy was extremely successful. The Soul Master legions that had dispersed into the Sun Moon Empire's territories were wreaking havoc everywhere, and they caused great damage to the Sun Moon Empire. The Star Luo Empire had more Soul Masters than the number of Soul Engineers that the Sun Moon Empire had brought back, and this disparity was even wider in terms of the number of powerful individuals. The Sun Moon Empire was badly bruised and battered as the Star Luo Empire overran several of their cities. However, the White Tiger Duke governed his army very strictly. Normal citizens were not to be harmed after the city had fallen, and their armies would pull out of the city after looting and pillaging the governing body's granaries and armories. Conquering cities wasn't the aim of their battle strategy, and wreaking excessive destruction wasn't within the White Tiger Duke's personality either. Pillaging resources was a lot more effective. Furthermore, doing so could also replenish the Star Luo Empire's own expenses. Everyone who participated in the strategy were Soul Masters, and many of them had storage soul tools. Pillaging was like a gentle breeze for them. Quickly, the Sun Moon Empire's eastern borders were in a state of emergency. Even though their intel was shut off and they didn't know about the Sun Moon Empire's response, or about the Heavenly Soul Empire's situation, the Star Luo Empire's operations would undoubtedly relieve the situation. The White Tiger Duke sent letters back several times to inquire about Hu Yuhao's physical state. After he made sure that Hu Yuhao was fine, he even personally wrote a commendation for Hu Yuhao for his contributions to the Star Luo Empire. The title of Marquis had also been conferred to Hu Yuhao. Xu Sanxia and the others rested and got ready for another day, and they made sure Hu Yuhao had recovered completely before he wrote a letter to the White Tiger Duke to bid their farewells. All 8 of them then departed the Star Luo Empire's army camp and journeyed back toward Shrek Academy. Both the White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo didn't want them to leave. However, the war situation at the front lines was of the utmost priority, so they couldn't take time out to attempt to keep the 8 of them here. Furthermore, they understood that these people from Shrek Academy couldn't be kept. Fortunately, both parties had established an amiable relationship after their missions, especially so after Hu Yuhao accepted his title of Marquis. This undoubtedly meant that Hu Yuhao was admitting he was a Soul Master from the Star Luo Empire. Everyone flew through the air. They came as 8, and they returned as 8. Hu Yuhao had practically returned from the dead, but everyone managed to return with their lives. However, everyone had experienced the cruelty of war. This was especially so after the top-tier individuals directly participated in the war. The death god Doluo Yi Shishure never appeared again after she departed. At least, the Star Luo Empire had yet to encounter that terrifying ultimate Doluo after they invaded the Sun Moon Empire. But no matter what, this ultimate Doluo was like an enormous shadow that loomed over the Star Luo Empire's head. Her appearance would lead to rivers of blood. The situation had descended into complete chaos. The 8 of them were returning to the academy to protect it, and that was what they absolutely had to do. Even though their individual strengths weren't much for Shrek Academy as a whole, Hu Yuhao's status was special, and his presence could even allow Shrek Academy to link up with the Great Star Do Forest's soul beasts for aid. If that was the case, Shrek Academy would be able to hold their own against the Sun Moon Empire if it was invaded. They maintained a strict formation as they flew through the air. Hu Yuhao flew in the center, but his eyes were a little lackadaisical. More accurately put, he had been in this state for the past few days. Whether he was walking, sitting, flying, or perhaps even eating, he would have a dazed and listless demeanor. His companions were a little worried about him, but he would always say that he was just contemplating some things when they asked. The truth was, he wasn't lying, he was contemplating some things that were extremely important to him. That tiny funnel that he was experimenting with was naturally the most important item amongst those things. Hu Yuhao had officially concluded his experiment's results after his last experiment. Even though he didn't manage to create a black hole like Di Qian's soul power in the end, the entire experimental process allowed him to discover and complete things that he had never known about. For instance, soul power would generate tremendous gravitational force once it was compressed into a solid state, and its absorption of external soul power would become stronger. This point was very important for his future cultivation. He was a soul sage, and his soul power had become liquid at this point. His liquid soul power's viscosity would increase as his cultivation increased. Wasn't that distinctly similar to what his soul power was like when he compressed it during the experiment? Furthermore, he had known about this principle a long time ago, that soul masters compressed the soul power inside their body continuously as their soul power increased, before more soul power would be stored. Soul masters' martial souls would naturally become stronger if their martial souls fused with stronger soul power. Elder Mu had told Hui Yuhao before that Soul Master's soul power would be continuously accumulated and compressed as they became stronger, and only when they became titled Doluo would things begin to change. However, Elder Mu didn't tell him much about titled Doluo. That wasn't because he forgot about those things. Hui Yuhao's cultivation was still very low at that point, and Elder Mu feared that Hui Yuhao would attempt to run before he could walk. Hui Yuhao recalled what Elder Mu had told him. According to Elder Mu, a Soul Master's soul power would reach the limit of its conversion from liquid to solid as he or she reached the pinnacle of an 8-ring Soul Doluo, which was rank 89, while titled Doluo would probably have entirely solid soul power. One of the most prominent characteristics of solid-state soul power was probably the fact that they could leverage the origin energy of heaven and earth in the air better. Hui Yuhao had already felt this in his experiment from before. Even if the solid-state soul power didn't absorb the Soul Master's own soul power, it would still continuously absorb the origin energy in the air by itself. The pertinent soul skill's strength would therefore increase throughout this process. This experiment was equivalent to opening a door to another world for Hui Yuhao, and it allowed him to see stranger things regarding Soul Masters. The first thing he wanted to do, when he returned to the academy, was to seek out Elder Xian, so that he could answer his questions and clear up his confusion. Hey, are you alright? Why are you always in such a daze? Did your injuries this time damage your brain? Tang Wutong was flying beside him, and she couldn't help but ask him that question. This fellow has been like this over the past few days. Everyone is worried about him, but they can't really press him any further for fear of upsetting him. He keeps saying that's his fine, his alright, but he doesn't seem like his alright at all. Eh? Hui Yuhao was deep in thought, and his thoughts became a little jumbled when he heard Tang Wutong's voice. He frowned a little and said, "Of course I'm fine. I'm just thinking about some things." Tang Wutong rolled her eyes and said, "What do you have to think about? That you have to do that for a few days? It's fine if something is wrong with you, just treat it as quickly as possible. Don't force yourself." Hui Yuhao snapped, "Nothing is wrong with me. I'm perfectly fine. There are some questions that I need to think more about, so don't interrupt my train of thought." With that, he continued flying forward as he began to contemplate once more. This guy. Tang Wutong glared at him, but he didn't respond at all. He doesn't recognize my good intentions at all. HMPH. Everyone flew continuously until midday before Shusansha, who had taken point, suggested for everyone to descend and have a rest. It was quite a coincidence that they descended onto a spot next to a wide river. This enormous river was 100 meters wide, and the flow of the water was very rapid. Even though it wasn't very clear, one would consider the bluish-green river water's clarity to be decent if its volume was taken into account. Hui Yuhao, I want to eat grilled fish. This river is so huge, I'm sure there are enough fish here. They must be very fat and juicy, Nan Qiuqiu exclaimed joyfully. Ah? Grilled fish? Hui Yuhao stared at her, and his eyes looked a little blank. Shusansha smiled and said, "Yes, Yuhao. Your grilled fish is the best in the world. Give us another taste of it. Everyone will probably get busy once we get back to the academy. You should also stop thinking and rest your mind a little bit. You should switch up your thoughts once in a while no matter what you're contemplating." Hui Yuhao couldn't really decline his request as he saw everyone's hopeful eyes. He nodded and went ahead to catch some fish. Tang Wutong secretly swallowed some saliva as she heard that they were eating grilled fish. She could still vividly recall the aromatic fragrance from the last time. Catching fish was like a hot knife on butter for a soul sage. Hui Yuhao chose to use the simplest and most brutal method. He froze some of the river's water before he transformed it into icy spheres and detonated them in the water with ice explosion. The vigorous shockwaves flipped a large amount of fish out, and Hui Yuhao used controlling crane capturing dragon to pull them onto the shore. The entire process took a little more than 10 seconds, and he proceeded to then process the fish. Yi Gai and Nan Qiuqiu had already gone to collect firewood, while the others helped out in their own way to prepare rations and start a fire. Hui Yuhao's movement was extremely quick. His deep thoughts over the past few days were very helpful to him, and he had an increasingly strong feeling that he had found the right path. Therefore, he was eager to continue thinking. The fish were processed after a short while, and a fire had been started. The grilling had begun. Hui Yuhao didn't do anything different from the last time. He was still very familiar with the techniques for grilling fish, and grilled fish quickly appeared one after another in his companion's hands for them to enjoy. Oh, this is good, it's so good, Nan Chocho exclaimed elatedly as she ate. Tang Wutong was also eating, but she realized that today's grilled fish seemed a little different from the last time, when they were traveling toward the Star Luo Empire's northwestern field army. The fish still tasted fresh and delicious, while the fire had been controlled extremely well, but something seemed to be missing. In a more exaggerated sense, the grilled fish seemed to lack spirit. Tang Wutong sat down beside Jiang Nan Nan. She couldn't help but whisper, "Sister Nan Nan, do you see any difference between the grilled fish today and the one we had the last time?" Jiang Nan Nan was momentarily stunned. "Difference? Nope. The fish is very tasty. You don't think it's nice?" Tang Wutong shook her head and replied, "Not that, I just feel like something seems to be missing from the last time." Jiang Nan Nan was dazed for another moment before a deep look appeared in her eyes. She whispered, "I think you're right. Hui Yu Hao thought you were Donga when he grilled fish for everyone the last time. He gave voice to the emotions in his inner heart when he was grilling for you. Afterwards, it should be because he realized that you're not Donga, so he has treated you like everyone else." "Eh?" Tang Wutong stared at Jiang Nan Nan, surprised. She turned her eyes toward the grilled fish in her hands. "The fish is missing emotions. It's missing a spirit. Can emotions be infused into a fish? In that case, his feelings for Wang Donga must be very deep." For some reason, envy seemed to develop in her heart as her thoughts stopped here. Everyone was satisfied after eating the grilled fish, and they continued their journey. It was midnight when they returned to Shrek City. Shusansha and the others went back to the Tang sect, while Hui Yu Hao and Tang Wutong went to Shrek Academy. Hui Yu Hao was the group leader, so he had to report the results of their expedition to Elder Xian. Tang Wutong didn't belong to the Tang sect, and she was staying in Shrek Academy in the first place. Darkness permeated the skies. Hui Yu Hao and Tang Wutong weren't flying anymore as they walked toward Shrek Academy, as that was a form of respect for the academy. Shrek City had transformed quite a bit over this period of time. With the full effort of the academy and the Doluo continent's 3 native empires, the new Shrek City's construction speed was one of the fastest in the continent. According to their current speed, they would need 1 more year at most before the Shrek City's overall structure would take shape, and they would need another 3 years after that before the new city would be completely established. Once the new Shrek City was constructed, its scale would rival that of Star Luo City and Heaven Do City. It would be second only to the Sun Moon Empire's Radiant City, which was the number 1 city on the continent. The academy's main gates were already shut. However, that didn't pose a problem to Hui Yu Hao or Tang Wutong at all. Hui Yu Hao didn't want to disturb anyone, so he used imitation before he concealed both Tang Wutong and himself, and they discreetly leapt over the wall. The sea god's lake came into view in the distance. Hui Yu Hao stopped as he arrived at the lakeside, and Tang Wutong did the same. The night sky was impressive tonight. Moonlight shone across the sea god's lake, and it cast light on the lake's clear ripples and waves. The moonlight was gentle, while all sorts of vegetation stacked on each other by the lakeside. The sea god's island was barely visible in the distance, as if this were a paradise on earth. Hui Yu Hao began to feel dazed as he saw everything in front of him. He could still clearly remember the time when he had realized that Donga was a girl, weren't they, on Sea God's Lake? The Sea God's fated blind date. Everything that had happened that day left an extremely deep impression in his mind. Idiot, I'm her idiot. I was with her for such a long time, yet I didn't realize she was a girl. That was really stupid of me. He recounted all the sweetness and tenderness he had shared with Donga, and the corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. He felt as if he could see Donga once more under the moonlight. Donga, have you really been beside me this entire time? But why don't you show yourself to see me? Hui Yu Hao reached inside as he reminisced, and retrieved the handkerchief that he had treasured this entire time. Tang Wutong was but momentarily stunned by the beautiful scenery on Sea God's Lake as she arrived by the lakeside. She was about to return to Sea God's Island, but she immediately realized that Hui Yu Hao was in a daze once more. Except, this was different from the last time. The way he was dazed from before seemed very muddlehead, as if he were very deep in thought. However, his eyes were very gentle in this moment, much like the moonlight reflecting off the lake. The corner of his mouth was curled upward, and there was a slight smile on his face. She instantly froze when she saw him reach into his shirt and take out a handkerchief that felt extremely familiar to her. Isn't that my handkerchief? Hui Yuhao closed his eyes as he held onto the handkerchief and slowly took a deep breath through his nose. The moist air on the lakeside and the clear and fresh smell of vegetation wafted into his nose, while the handkerchief's crisp aroma that he had yearned for was also part of all those refreshing smells that he was familiar with. He felt as if his heart and mind were both intoxicated as his entire body relaxed. Tang Wutong was just watching him from beside him. She blushed a little. Why is he holding my handkerchief? Does that mean he knows that I was sleeping beside him that night? Hui Yuhao opened his eyes as he looked down at the handkerchief in his hands and heaved a faint sigh. Dorma, when will you return to my side? Have you really forgotten about me, or do you have some hidden troubles? If you have any problems, why don't you let me face them together with you? Bastard. He thinks my handkerchief belongs to her. Tang Wutong was so upset that she started to pout. Hui Yuhao was completely immersed in his wonderful memories. Naturally, he wasn't paying attention to Tang Wutong's emotional changes. However, she didn't disturb him and was just standing next to him. This bastard is quite concentrated in his love. Tang Wutong couldn't help but recall the first time she had met Hui Yuhao. He almost immediately charged at her and embraced her in his arms, and that embrace was burning with passion and filled with emotions. Tang Wutong was overcome with embarrassment at that time, but she felt as if she were about to melt in his arms. She began to feel a little feverish when she recalled that moment. Hui Yuhao finally came to from his deep dream after a long while, and he glanced at Tang Wutong with an apologetic look in his eyes. I'm sorry, I phased out. Thank you. Tang Wutong was momentarily stunned. What are you thanking me for? Hui Yuhao smiled and said, thank you for not waking me from my dream. It feels great to be home, let's go. With that, he soared into the sky like a large bird gliding across Sea God's lake. He tapped gently on the surface of the lake, and a small piece of ice formed underneath his feet and supported the weight of his body. He continued gliding forward as he strode across the lake like rolling clouds and flowing water. Tang Wutong followed behind him. She didn't step on those ice pieces, but quietly flew behind him instead. Hui Yuhao glowed with spirit, health, and vigor when he spoke his thanks to her. She seemed to have seen Hui Yuhao in such a state when they left Shrek Academy back then. He still thought she was Wang Donga. Now, that Hui Yuhao that she recalled seeing seemed to have returned. Tang Wutong wanted to tell Hui Yuhao that the handkerchief belonged to her, but she erased that thought from her head when she witnessed the vigor and vitality in his eyes. Even though it was just a small thread of hope, some was better than none. They stepped onto Sea God's island. Hui Yuhao went to the Sea God's pavilion, while Tang Wutong returned to her own place. Hui Yuhao would be doing the reporting, so she didn't have to follow him. Hui Yuhao stood in front of the golden tree, and knelt down in front of it before going to the Sea God's pavilion. He respectfully kowtowed thrice toward the golden tree. I have returned, teacher. Even though you might find this hard to believe, I did meet Hishishure on my expedition. She is now the Sun Moon Empire's death god Doluor, and she is an evil soul master, who is also an ultimate Doluor. She is likely to be the continent's first-class 10-soul engineer. Faint golden light rippled from the golden tree, and dense elements of light were clearly visible. These undulations were extremely intense at first before they returned to complete calm. Teacher, did you hear me? Hui Yuhao exclaimed joyfully. The golden tree no longer gave him any signs. Faint golden hues radiated gently, and everything seemed to return to tranquility. Elder Mu can't answer you anymore. He released his strength the last time, and his spirit has been damaged. He can only nurture himself inside the golden tree. Yuhao, were your words really true? Elder Xian had arrived beside Hui Yuhao, and his face was overcome with solemnity. Hui Yuhao nodded and got to his feet. He recounted everything that had happened when he faced off against Hishishure, and everything else that he had heard and seen on his expedition in front of the golden tree. Elder Xian's expression turned even blacker when he heard Hui Yuhao's words. He glanced at the golden tree and said, "Follow me inside." Elder Xian brought Hui Yuhao into the Sea God's pavilion. They didn't wait in the main hall, but Elder Xian brought him directly into his own room. Sit down, Elder Xian pointed at a chair inside the room. Hui Yuhao walked over to sit down and said apologetically, "I apologize for disturbing your rest by coming so late in the night." Elder Xian sighed and said, "How can I have the mood to rest? The situation in the continent has suddenly become so deplorable. I never thought that the Sun Moon Empire has hidden such deep secrets. Hui Yuhao hurriedly asked, back when I was at the Star Luo Empire's front lines. I heard that the Heavenly Soul Empire has lost a lot of territory, and even the Heaven Do city has been lost. What is the situation like now? Elder Xian shook his head and said, the situation is terrible. The Heavenly Soul Empire has already lost 2/3 of their territory to the Sun Moon Empire. The Sun Moon Empire had to task some of their soldiers to handle their conquered territories, and they also had to pacify the Heavenly Soul Empire's citizens. If not for those reasons, the Sun Moon Empire would have conquered every inch of the Heavenly Soul Empire. The Heavenly Soul Empire's remaining soldiers have already rendezvoused with the Star Luo Empire and the Douling Empire, and they are holding on to the last of their territories. However, it will be extremely difficult for them to defend it. The Heavenly Soul Empire has already sent messengers to the Academy for aid. The Douling Empire has also started to send their armies into the Heavenly Soul Empire. Hui Yuhao wasn't overly surprised, as he had already predicted such a situation. The Douling Empire's thoughts were very simple. They hoped to keep their enemies out of their borders and keep the battle in the Heavenly Soul Empire. That would evidently be more beneficial for them. Therefore, it was natural that they were sending their armies forward. Otherwise, the Douling Empire would end up like the Star Luo Empire if the Heavenly Soul Empire was destroyed. They would have to prepare to suffer the Sun Moon Empire's cannon fire at any moment. The Heavenly Soul Empire sending for aid from the Academy was also expected. However, the Heavenly Soul Empire's nation-protecting sect, the Body Sect, couldn't protect them against the Sun Moon Empire's assault. How much stronger could Shrek Academy be than the Body Sect? Shrek Academy would definitely be stronger in terms of overall strength. However, Shrek was an academy, not a sect. The Academy didn't have the same common interests as the Body Sect. The Academy's elders naturally wouldn't be a problem, but the teachers and students didn't have a duty to fight for the Academy. Even if they agreed to, the Academy's higher levels would definitely have to consider the safety of these teachers and students, quite unlike the common interests shared within sects. Therefore, Elder Xian had been very hesitant these days about the Heavenly Soul Empire's request for aid, and he hadn't sent out any reinforcements yet. Engineer Leji. Reinforcements were important, but the question of scale posed a very large problem. If the Heavenly Soul Empire had been completely dominated by the Sun Moon Empire, they would be able to directly threaten Shrek City. There was no question that the Sun Moon Empire would attack Shrek City. In the beginning, Shrek Academy's participation in the war finally allowed the Dolor continent's 3 native empires to beat the Sun Moon Empire back, and the Sun Moon Empire was ultimately defeated. The Sun Moon Empire held up for 1,000 years after that. The Sun Moon Empire had obtained all possible advantages, and they would never let Shrek City go. They had the most advanced technology on the continent, and their assault could likely be even more frightening than the Great Star Do Forest's beast wave back then. Elder Xian, you have to take care of your body. Hui Yuhao could clearly see that there were more wrinkles around the corners of Elder Xian's eyes. Elder Xian glanced at him and smiled warmly as he said, to be honest, I'm not very good at being a leader. My life was carefree when Elder Mu was around. I was wanton and unrestrained, and I was very happy from beginning to end. Ever since Elder Mu left, that burden has been shifted onto my shoulders. I finally truly understand the kind of responsibility that Elder Mu had borne for so many years. If only the Sun Moon Empire had delayed their assault for a few decades more. By then, you would have grown to become a man, and I could have passed this mantle to you. Elder Xian smiled, but there was some bitterness in that smile, which was bathed with the vicissitudes of life. Hui Yuhao said, Elder Xian, I will work hard to grow up. I am willing to give everything for the Academy. Elder Xian said, now is not the time to give everything you have. If the situation forces our hand in the end and we cannot defend ourselves against the Sun Moon Empire, then you must remember that you must continue to live on. You and the other young men are the hope of the Academy. Do you understand? Hui Yuhao felt his heart skip a beat. He could clearly sense some bad omens in Elder Xian's words. Elder Xian said, Yi Shishui is actually still alive, I didn't expect that. Furthermore, she has become the Sun Moon Empire's death god Doluo. With her and Long Xiaoyao around, unless the beast god stands directly with us against them, there is no chance that we can defeat them. Furthermore, the beast god represents the benefit of all soul beasts. With his personality, he is no doubt more than eager to watch humans hurt each other, and to see the human elites perish. That is most beneficial for soul beasts. Therefore, even if he did participate, he would wait until both parties have been badly hurt. We can't depend on him at this moment. Hui Yuhao said, Elder Xian, can we gather some reclusive sects to come together and fight the Sun Moon Empire? In the end, things will be bad for them if the Sun Moon Empire conquers the Doluo continent's 3 native empires. Elder Xian answered, we are already doing that, and some sects have already responded positively. However, the Sun Moon Empire's soul tool technology is far more advanced than ours. Their prowess in battle sweeps aside everything in their path. I have obtained some detailed battle reports from the Heavenly Soul Empire. The Sun Moon Empire and Heavenly Soul Empire's losses are 1 to 10. Even with the body sect's participation in the defense of the Heaven Do City, their losses were still 5 to 1 compared to the Sun Moon Empire. It's hard to say what the war will be like in the future. Fortunately, you helped the Star Luo Empire regain the Mingdo mountain range, and you've finally held the Sun Moon Empire back for a period of time. Time is increasingly important for us. I have already instructed the Tang sect to push back all soul tools that are meant to be sold and all purchase requests, so that they can focus all their efforts on crafting soul tools to equip Shrek's city defense army. We can only hope that Shrek City's defense army can turn the tides of battle. Hui Yuhao could feel fear creeping into his heart. He naturally understood the kind of pressure that Elder Xian had to bear to make such a decision. The Star Luo Empire and Heavenly Soul Empire both lacked resources, but the Tang sect's production was very limited. How much effort would they have to put into equip a legion with enough strength to fight against the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer legions? Elder Xian, why don't I seek out Di Qian tomorrow? Elder Xian shook his head and said, there's no use. Soul beasts have always only protected their own and not outsiders. Di Qian can only protect you. He's more than happy to see other humans die, the more the better. Don't waste your time. You should go and rest. You should return to the Tang sect after resting up for a few days, so that you can help the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall produce soul tools more quickly. All of the Academy's resources and the resources that the Doluo continent's 3 native empires have sent to support us have been granted to the Tang sect. Perhaps the Tang sect's strength will be key to the final outcome of the war. Yes, Hui Yuhao acknowledged and stood up. Elder Xian said, we will send news from the front lines to the Tang sect as soon as it comes. You can rest assured as you cultivate and craft soul tools in your sect. You don't have to bother yourself with other things for the moment. Yes. Hui Yuhao acknowledged once again, before leaving Elder Xian's room. He didn't remain in the Sea God's pavilion, but went back to the Tang sect. His body had just recovered, and he didn't dare to toil the entire night. He returned to the Tang sect, where his own room was, and begun to meditate to recover his physical strength. On the morning of the second day, he ate his breakfast before Bei Bei gathered the senior management of the Tang sect for a meeting. Hui Yuhao went to report to Elder Xian the night before. Shu Sanxia recounted the entire process in detail as a means of updating Bei Bei. Just like Elder Xian had mentioned, the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall was very busy. Shrek Academy sent all their teachers and students from the Soul Tool department to the Tang sect, personally led by Dean Qian Duoduo. They were now all under Xian Zuan. The Academy also sent over all types of resources, and Dean Xian Lina and Teacher Fan Yu led a batch of teachers from the Martial Soul Department to instruct the students of the Academy, as well as the Shrek City Defense Army on the use of soul tools. The Tang sect had already been relocated into 2 different areas. One of them was at the original address, while the other region was a huge factory that was used to manufacture soul tools. Eldest Senior. Hui Yuhao hurriedly greeted Bei Bei when he saw him. However, Bei Bei was unkind to him. He said, Little Junior, you aren't allowed to perform any missions without my permission from now on. What? Hui Yuhao was shocked as he looked at him. He asked, Eldest Senior, why is that so? Bei Bei ferociously banged the table and furiously said, Before you left, what did I tell you? My words have fallen on deaf ears, haven't they? You disregarded your own safety and took such a huge risk. How dare you still ask me why? Hui Yuhao suddenly looked very embarrassed. He scratched his head and looked at Shu Sanxia helplessly. Shu Sanxia chuckled and said, Yuhao, don't look at me. You were injured earlier, such that I couldn't bear to reprimand you. Did you really think I couldn't tell what you were planning? I was fooled by you at the start. After that, I realized that the door that you left behind was supposed to be used to return back to the base, am I right? This means that you didn't stand a chance at all. If not for the power that Di Qian left in your body, you would have been dead. Eldest Senior is right. Don't go out and perform any missions anymore. Remain in the sect and focus on your cultivation. Hu Yuhao revealed a disgruntled look on his face. Third Senior, you can't put it that way. I was forced by circumstances then, wasn't I? If I didn't help the Star Luo Empire achieve a decisive victory, the Sun Moon Empire would have run riot in the Heavenly Soul Empire. Bei Bei looked very cold. All right, there's no use in saying all of that. Sit down. Whatever it is, you won't be allowed to leave Shrek City without my permission. Otherwise, you'll be expelled from the sect. Bei Bei was normally very refined and very nice in his treatment of the members of Shrek's 7 monsters. This was especially so for Hu Yuhao. This was his first time he had lost his temper against Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao was instantly very fearful and didn't dare to argue back. He could only sit down disappointingly, and he appeared very helpless. Nan Qiuqiu was sitting beside him and started to secretly laugh. Hu Yuhao was frustrated as he glanced at her. He asked, "Is it that funny?" Nan Qiuqiu chortled, "You deserve it. Who asked you to lose your cool? We support Eldest Senior's punishment of you. Just remain in the sect and cultivate." At this moment, Bei Bei said, "During these few days that you weren't around, the Tang sect has already started to move on all fronts. According to Elder Xian's instructions, what we need to do first is equip an army that is capable of resisting the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer legions. The members of this army will be formed by the teachers and outstanding students of the academy. I'm going to repeat the plan now, and we'll see if anyone has anything to add. The academy has considered the opinions of all parties after a conference. They've decided to set up 3 Soul Engineer legions." 3? Hu Yuhao was slightly shocked when he heard this number. If they were like the Sun Moon Empire, each Soul Engineer Legion would be composed of 500 people. This meant that equipping 3 Soul Engineer Legions would mean equipping 1,500 people. How easy was it to create enough equipment for 1,500 people to use? Furthermore, the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer Legions were strong in the sense that their Soul Tool technologies were leading in the entire continent. Formations of Soul Tools and linked Soul Tools were some things that the Tang sect lacked. Why were there so few casualties from the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer Legions when they fought? Hundreds of the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineers unleashed linked Soul Tools, creating a line of defense that even Transcendent Doluor were helpless against. Wasn't it a little too hasty for the academy to set up 3 Soul Engineer Legions? Bei Bei glanced at Hu Yuhao and managed to see how astonished he was. A smiling intent flashed across his face. However, he soon returned to his cold and indifferent look and continued, saying, "Out of these 3 Soul Engineer Legions, the first legion will be called the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion." The academy approved this name. It'll also be the most elite legion out of the 3. It'll consist of 200 Soul Engineers. They'll all be equipped with the most advanced technologies that the Tang sect possesses right now. All the Soul Engineers will at least be Soul Emperors. The leader of this legion will be Dean Xian Lina, and the vice leader of this legion will be Dean Xian Duo. At the same time, there will be 10 titled Doluor in this legion, all from the academy. However, Dean Xian Lina will be the only transcendent Doluor. 200. That's still rather reliable. Hu Yuhao heaved a slight sigh of relief when he heard that. However, he opened his eyes wide when he heard 10 titled Doluor. 10 titled Doluor. Even the Sun Moon Empire's Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Legion, the strongest out of the hand that protects the nation, didn't have so many titled Doluor. Moreover, all the Soul Engineers from this legion would at least be Soul Emperors, even though there were only 200 of them. It really seemed like they wanted to create the number 1 Soul Engineer Legion on the continent. Bei Bei said, "Currently, we've decided to equip this Soul Engineer Legion with custom-made Soul Tools, including the newly created batch of linked Soul Tools. Teacher Xian will also personally supervise and participate in the creation of core parts of all equipment. We've predicted that we'll be able to fully equip all of them within half a year to a year's time." Hu Yuhao lifted his hand and said, "Eldest Senior, I have a question." Bei Bei glanced at him and said, "What's the question?" Hu Yuhao said, "Given the Tang sect's current abilities, there shouldn't be no problem creating Soul Tools for Soul Emperors. In terms of linked Soul Tools, we shouldn't have a problem either, since we have Teacher Xian. However, Soul Emperors should only be a small part of this Soul Engineer Legion. Soul Sages, Soul Doluor and Title Doluor will make up the large bulk of this Soul Engineer Legion. The soul tools that they will be using should be even more advanced, otherwise, they won't be effective enough. Do we have the ability to create so many advanced soul tools? Bei Bei nodded and thought to himself. No wonder he's our little junior. He managed to find the core of the problem so quickly. Your question is very good. Yes, we won't be able to create so many suitable soul tools given our current abilities. This is why, after much discussion, we've decided that the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion will be composed entirely of close combat soul engineers. For all the soul tools we are going to manufacture, we've decided to focus on those that increase speed and offensive strength. Secondarily, they'll be tailored to increase survivability on the battlefield. The only linked soul tool will be for mass defense. After hearing his words, Hu Yuhao was immediately enlightened. At the same time, his eyes brightened. It's a great idea, isn't it? What are the Soul Masters from Shrek Academy most adept at? It's the way they fight. In the entire continent, Shrek Academy is the best in this aspect. Since this is the case, why would we focus on long-range attacks? Close combat soul engineers, increasing speed, offensive strength, and survivability. If we can achieve all these, we would naturally increase the fighting strength of our Soul Masters. If that's the case, that's great then. Eldest senior, you can continue. Hu Yuhao was in awe as he looked at Bei Bei. Bei Bei glared at him unkindly and continued, saying, for the other two Soul Engineer Legions, there will be more people. The first of the other two Soul Engineer Legions will be called the Heavy Artillery Soul Engineer Legion. They'll be equipped with the most advanced Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons. They'll be given 300 of them, of varying classes. There will be a total of 1,000 Soul Masters in the Legion. Our aim is to ensure the agility of our heavy cannons as we increase our firepower, and also to ensure that the Soul Engineers wielding these cannons will be able to get into formations at the quickest speed under any condition, and at any place. Currently, we've already requested the purchase of a huge batch of low to mid-tier Soul Cannon shells. Some of them have even secretly been imported from the Sun Moon Empire. In addition, we are also manufacturing our own cannon shells. Heavy Artillery Soul Engineer Legion. It was much simpler to equip such a Soul Engineer Legion. The Tang sect had already been producing Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons, and thus had an increasing stock of them. However, the stronger a cannon was, the less portable it was. How could they ensure that they could move the cannons as quickly as possible? Furthermore, they still had to preserve the fighting strength of the cannons. What they needed were sufficient sealed milk bottles to support these cannons. Wait, 1,000 people and 300 cannons. It seems like Eldest Senior is trying to use people to make up for the lack of sealed milk bottles. After all, every Soul Master is a source of energy. If they take turns to pour soul power into the Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons, they should be able to attack continuously for some time. If 300 Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons are fired at the same time, they would unleash terrifying strength. Hu Yuhao could still clearly remember that Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons had played a very critical role in Shrek City when the Beast Wave came. Part 2 end here.